Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today on this webinar about our open funding opportunity to support vehicle electrifications. My name is Greg Betzweiser, Contract Specialist here at MEC, and I'll be one of your guides as we walk through this RFA, which is supported by federal funds via the U.S. Department of Energy. Before we dive into the details, this webinar will be recorded and will be available on the MEC website. Now, let's cover a few housekeeping items. Since we're going to be doing this virtually and not in meeting form, all attendees will be on mute throughout the presentation. If you have questions as we go along, please submit them in the Q&A box of the GoToWebinar screen. You can also email questions to rfa@metroenergy.org, and questions will be accepted until January 4th. Any answers provided will be posted to the MEC website. And as mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, so let's get started.
Thank you, Greg, for getting us settled in. I'm Royce Martin, Director of People and Operations here at Metropolitan Energy Center. This webinar is designed to give you everything you need to know about applying for this specific opportunity for electrical vehicles and charging stations. We'll spend time on the funding details, objectives of the program, and the application process. And we will be available to answer questions at the end of the webinar. We hope you leave here feeling confident about the process. Whether you're a municipality, a business, or a nonprofit, our goal is to assist you with the information you need to submit a complete application.
We'll give you a little rundown on the timeline for this RFA process. The RFA was issued on November 15th, 2024, and this is the pre-application meeting, as you can see, December 4th. Questions deadline is January 4th at 4 p.m. Central, and the RFA submission deadline is January 15th at 2 p.m. Now we're expecting the notifications of selection to happen around January 29th, and the expected time frame for the award negotiations will be the month of February 2025. And if you have for updates in the Q&A, you can find that on the website at metroenergy.org/RFA funding-EVS-2024. And now I'm going to explain an overview of this opportunity. And for those of you who want to get right down to business, here's the headline. There's up to $157,000 available, and this is as a reimbursement, which can cover up to 35% of your eligible project costs. This funding is designed to support projects that deploy electric vehicles or electric charging stations with a strong emphasis on community impact. Eligible projects must align with sustainability goals and focus on underserved communities, address environmental justice issues, or benefit areas with historically limited resources. It's also important to note that MEC prioritizes projects capable of delivering tangible improvements to air quality and public health. With these funds, we intend to incentivize practical solutions that contribute to reducing transportation emissions and improving access to clean technology. Keep in mind, the full award might go to a single project if its scope justifies the maximum reimbursement rate. We'll dive deeper into eligible expenses, the funding process, and selection criteria throughout the webinar. But now let's go over the criteria that will guide us how projects are chosen. As we said, this is a competitive funding opportunity, so it's important to understand what makes a strong application. Projects must involve electric vehicles and/or electric charging stations. This includes both hardware like EVs and chargers and related outreach initiatives that help communities adopt these technologies. Another critical requirement is location. Projects must be implemented in Kansas or Missouri with preference given to underserved or environmental justice areas. These areas often face higher pollution levels from transportation, which contributes to asthma, family illnesses, lost school and work days. And addressing these inequities is a priority for this funding. Your expenses must also fall within allowable categories. Eligible costs include the purchase of EVs, installation of charging stations, and outreach activities directly supporting the project. However, costs unrelated to the project's direct impact, like operating expenses or unrelated administrative overhead, will not qualify. Now, as advancements in clean technology, transportation technologies progress, a slim, affluent market share is reaping the benefits of clean charging networks and clean air in the neighborhoods where they live and work, while an untapped, much larger market is falling behind in terms of opportunity and health. This project leverages EV and charging stations in innovative ways in order to make deployments within a broad and equitable market. This can be achieved by innovative community engagement that centers community leaders as decision makers, provision of community PEV and charging stations, as well as targeted fleet deployments in communities heavily impacted by transportation emissions. A primary objective is to achieve understanding and development of the PEV market, with underserved markets consisting of low to moderate income consumers through a coordinated three-phase strategy. MEC, which is experienced in supporting research, development, and solution deployment, will first optimize project design by involving consumer representatives from within community groups and grassroots organizations. They will connect select historically divested project partners with cost share funding and fund management support. And finally, we'll deploy PEV and EV charging stations at locations likely to experience midterm growth and secondhand PEV ownership. MEC has reserved a significant percentage of the total project budget for these small grants. The second objective of the project is to help fleets operating within environmental justice areas and other underserved areas to electrify their heavy vehicles, especially those operating at low speeds or adjacent to residential neighborhoods. Emissions from heavy vehicles and off-road machinery contribute to asthma rates and family illness, which keeps people away from jobs and school and contributes to early deaths and other health social impacts. I'm going to read the definition of environmental justice. The definition of environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. This goal will be achieved when everyone enjoys the same degree of protection from environmental and health hazards and equal access to the decision-making process to have a healthy environment in which they live, work, and learn. The guidance document includes links to recommended websites where you can find how your proposed deployment site relates to local or regional environmental justice zones.
Thank you, Greg. So to access this funding, applicants must be prepared to cover the full project cost up front. We talked a moment ago about the 35% reimbursement cap. That means that 65% of the total cost is the responsibility of the applicant, which is referred to as cost sharing in the application documents. This requirement ensures federal dollars are leveraged effectively to support impactful work, align closely with the program's goals, and demonstrate efficient use of funds, including voluntary reductions in the federal share. We also want to emphasize flexibility in cost sharing. While a 65% applicant share is the baseline, applicants who voluntarily propose a lower federal share, for example, requesting only 30% reimbursement, will have a competitive advantage during the selection process. This approach allows more projects to benefit from the available funds. If your project is selected and awarded, you need to purchase and install the EVs and charging stations. After completing the work, you'll submit to MEC receipts or other required proof of payment, along with the proof of deployment. Keep in mind that the reimbursement process requires adherence to strict documentation standards, and MEC will only reimburse costs verified as eligible under the program rules. This ensures transparency and accountability while safeguarding public funds.
Thank you, Royce. Next, let's talk about the cost-sharing aspect of this program. As we've mentioned earlier, applicants must contribute at least 65% of the total project cost, which ensures that the federal funds are being leveraged effectively to support high-impact projects. However, this doesn't mean that every applicant needs to contribute the same percentage. If your organization is able to contribute more than the minimum 65%, then you can strengthen your application and increase your chances of being selected. On the other hand, if your organization has limited resources, there's flexibility in how you can structure your cost share. The federal government allows some leeway for projects that may need extra support to participate. If you decide to request a lower federal share, like 30% rather than the full 35%, you can improve your competitiveness. Keep in mind that cost sharing is not about securing funds. It's about showing that your project is sustainable and will have long-term benefits for your community.
Now let's discuss what expenses are not covered under this funding opportunity. It's important to understand these limitations to avoid wasting effort on ineligible costs. First, operational expenses like ongoing maintenance, fuel costs, or staff salaries unrelated to the project are not reimbursable. The same goes for general administrative overhead that doesn't directly impact the implementation of EV or charging stations. Second, costs associated with vehicles or equipment that don't meet the program's criteria. Again, for example, used or retrofitted vehicles will not qualify. Only new factory manufactured vehicles certified by regulatory bodies are eligible. Finally, advertising or promotional activities unrelated to community outreach for your project are also excluded. This program is designed, hang tight folks, to drive measurable on-the-ground impact, and funding is reserved for expenses that directly contribute to those outcomes. So by focusing your budget on allowable categories, you can maximize the effectiveness and eligibility of your application.
Thank you, Royce. Let's go through the criteria for evaluation. Now, evaluation of the applications will be by a review committee consisting of MEC staff and other members. Applicants will be notified if additional information or documentation is required. No additional information otherwise volunteered, including email and phone calls, will be considered once the review process is underway. And while evaluating projects for funding, the review committee will consider the following criteria. Project merit has a weight of 25 points. Impact and outcomes, including environmental justice, 20 points, diesel and gasoline displacement, 5 points, and health impacts, 5 points, amount to 30 points total weight. Public engagement and project sustainability, the extent to which a project contributes to outreach and engagement, that's 10 points. Extent of planning for future electrification work is 5 points. Cost effectiveness and budget. This category considers completeness and accuracy of budget, 10 points. Extent to which applicant provides voluntary cost share is 15 points. And then applicant experience and qualifications, another 5 points, possible for a total of 100 points.
Excellent, Greg, thank you. Now that we've covered the funding details, let's discuss and focus on the timeline and key deadlines. The application period is currently open, so you can begin preparing your submission today. The deadline for submitting applications is January 15th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Central. Applications must be submitted electronically to rfa@metroenergy.org. Late submissions cannot be accepted, so we encourage you to plan ahead and avoid last-minute technical issues. If you have questions about the application process, this deadline is January 4th by 4 p.m. Central. Questions, once again, should be submitted to rfa@metroenergy.org. The subject line is very important. We need to have query for DOE-EVRFA in quotes in the subject line. Keep these dates in mind as you move forward. Meeting deadlines is critical to ensuring your application is considered for this opportunity. Now we're going to summarize the key points about the funding opportunity. Once again, this program offers up to $157,000 in reimbursement, covering up to 35% of eligible project costs. Projects must align with sustainability goals and prioritize underserved or environmental justice communities. The funding process requires applicants to cover costs up front and provide detailed documentation to qualify for reimbursement. We've outlined the importance of thorough planning and clear record keeping to ensure your application and reimbursement goes smoothly. We've reviewed the key timelines and milestones, including submission deadlines and the process for addressing any questions you may have along the way. Remember, this funding is competitive, so focusing on the program's goals and aligning your project with its priorities will be essential to your success. Now, let's shift on focus to the application process. We'll break this down step by step to ensure you have a clear roadmap for submitting a strong and complete application. The first step is to download all the necessary documents from the RFA landing page. This includes the application form, budget workbook, and any templates for letters of commitment or support. Each document serves a specific purpose and must be completed accurately to avoid delays or disqualification. Once you have your materials, start filling out the application form. This document is where you'll provide details about your project, its goals, and how it aligns with the funding program's objectives. Be concise and thorough, and make sure your responses address the criteria we've discussed. After completing the application, move on to the budget workbook. This is where you'll itemize your project costs and clearly outline the federal share you're requesting, along with your cost-sharing contributions. Finally, we'd like you to gather your supporting documents, review everything for accuracy, and submit your application before the deadline. We'll go into more detail about each step in the next few slides. The key takeaway is to stay organized and start early. Now let's talk about these key documents you'll need to include in your application. Each one serves an important role in demonstrating your project's viability and alignment with the funding program. First is that application form, which provides the foundation of your submission. This is where you'll describe your project, its objectives, and how it fits the program's goals. It's critical to fill this out completely and accurately. Next, as mentioned, is the budget workbook, a detailed spreadsheet where you'll outline every cost associated with your project. The workbook includes multiple tabs for specific categories such as equipment or construction costs and requires a clear breakdown of the federal and applicant shares. You'll also need a letter of commitment signed by someone authorized to make financial commitments for your organization. This letter should state the amount your organization is contributing and confirm your commitment to completing the project if you are selected. Lastly, while optional, letters of support from community partners can strengthen your application. These letters show that your project has local buy-in and aligns with broader community needs. Make sure to review the RFA landing page for any additional templates or guidance on completing these documents. This is very important as our reim process overview. It is central to this funding opportunity, so let's break it down step by step. First, your project must be completed before you are eligible for reimbursement. This means you'll need to purchase and deploy your EV technology or charging station up front. Once your project is operational, you'll submit a detailed reimbursement package to MEC. This package includes invoices, receipts, and photos documenting the equipment in use. These materials must clearly demonstrate that your expenses align with the program's eligibility criteria. And after MEC receives your documentation, we'll conduct a thorough review. This step ensures compliance with federal funding requirements and validates that the requested reimbursement is accurate and justified. Once the review is complete, MEC will coordinate with the Department of Energy to issue the reimbursement funds. It's very worth emphasizing that this is a reimbursement program, not a grant issued in advance. You'll need to plan your budget carefully to accommodate upfront costs while you await the reimbursement. By staying organized and submitting thorough documentation, you can help streamline this process and receive your funds as efficiently as possible. Here's the good part, all right? Now let's dive into the application form itself. This document is your opportunity to showcase your project and explain why it deserves funding. We want you to start by completing the basic information section, which includes your organization's name, contact details, and a brief project title. Make sure this information is accurate and matches any supporting documentation you'll be submitting. The next section asks for a project description. Now here we would like you to focus on clarity and alignment with the program's goals. Highlight the community impact, how this project addresses environmental justice, and how it fits within the broader goals of sustainability and emissions reduction. You'll also need to describe the technical aspects of your project, including the equipment you plan to deploy. Be specific and avoid vague language. The more detail you provide, the easier it will be for reviewers to understand the scope of your project. Finally, review each field carefully before submission. Incomplete or inconsistent responses can slow down the review process or even disqualify your application. So accuracy is key. The workbook that we have designed is one of the most critical parts of your application. So let's go over how to complete it effectively. The workbook is designed to capture every detail of your project's cost, and it's divided into several tabs. Hopefully you will see that at the bottom of this particular slide. You'll find an instruction tab and additional tabs for equipment, contractors, and other specific categories. Start by entering the full cost of each line item into hang on, team. You're going to start, let's do that again, all right? After we hit the instruction tab, then we're going to enter the full cost of each line item, not just the amount you're requesting as reimbursement. This ensures clarity when calculating the federal and applicant shares. The summary tab will automatically calculate the total costs, federal share and applicant share based on the information you enter. Make sure the federal share aligns with the program's goals, which cap it at 35%. If you are including voluntary cost share contributions, highlight those clearly. This can strengthen your application and demonstrate your organization's commitment to this project. Finally, double check your math and ensure that all tabs are completed accurately. Incomplete or inconsistent budget information can delay the review process or reduce your chances of being selected. The budget workbook is one of the most critical parts of this application, so let's go over how to complete it effectively. The workbook is designed to capture every detail of your project's cost, divided into these several tabs. You'll find an instruction tab once again and additional tabs for the equipment, the contractors, and other specific categories. We're going to start by entering the full cost of each line item, not just the amount you're requesting. The summary tab will automatically calculate the total cost, federal share, and applicant share based on the information you enter. And once again, we're going to cap this at 35%. All right, let's see. We are sharing with you all of the various tabs where your supplies would be entered, your contractual efforts would be entered, your equipment station, your personnel. And finally, this is what the budget summary workbook overview looks like. All right. Once you've completed the application form, your budget workbook, and any supporting documents, it's time to submit your application. All submissions must be sent electronically to rfa@metroenergy.org. That deadline is critical, with the subject being application for DOE RFA by 2 p.m. on January 15th, and that is Central Standard Time. Applications received after this time will not be considered, so it's critical to plan ahead and submit early. If you have questions about the submission process or need clarification on any part of the application, once again, that deadline is January 4th at 4 p.m. Central. Send your questions to the same email with this subject headline, query for DOE-EV-RFA in the subject line. By following these instructions and meeting all deadlines, you'll ensure your application is reviewed promptly and fairly. Once you start finalizing your application, it is important to avoid common mistakes that could delay or disqualify your submission. So let's go over a few of these that we've seen as most frequent issues. Incomplete or inaccurate documentation can be a major stumbling block. Make sure every required document is included and thoroughly reviewed. Pay close attention to your work book the budget and ensure all calculations are accurate and consistent with the information in your application form. Another common issue is failing to meet deadlines. Applications submitted after 2 p.m. Central on January 15th will not be considered. So be sure to plan ahead and allow time for any last-minute adjustments. Some applicants also miss key eligibility requirements, such as the minimum cost sharing contribution or the need for projects to serve Kansas or Missouri communities. Review the criteria carefully to confirm your project aligns with the program's goals. Now let's take a moment to once again revisit the critical dates and deadlines for the funding opportunity. The first key is all of your questions must be submitted by January 4th at 4 p.m. Central. That headline is very critical, query for DOE-EV RFA. And then we are accepting all final applications January 15th at 2 p.m. Central. That title should be Application for DOE-EV RFA. January 15th, 2 p.m. Central. I'm going to turn this next section over to Greg, and he's going to go over the next steps.
Thank you, Royce. Let's walk through the post-submission process. After the January 15th deadline, all applications will be reviewed by MEC and our selection committee. We'll evaluate each submission based on the criteria we've outlined, including project alignment, cost effectiveness, and community impact. This process is competitive, so the stronger your application, the better your chances of being selected. If your application is selected, you'll receive a notification from MEC with the next steps. This includes signing an agreement to accept the federal terms and conditions of the funding. Once the agreement is in place, you'll be able to move forward with your project. For applicants not selected, you will be notified.
Please visit metroenergy.org/backslash RFA-funding-EVS-2024 to download the DOE-EV RFA guidance documents. You will find proprietary and confidential information, binding offer, disclaimer, how to make sure you submit your FEIN and UEI numbers, and all of these administrative terms will be detailed in this particular section on our RFA landing page. Now, if you have any questions about the application process, required documents, or submission details, please type them into the Q&A box. And for now, I'm going to hand things off to Kelly Gilbert, who is our Executive Director. If there's anything we cannot answer today, feel free to follow up with us by email. We're committed to providing the guidance you need to navigate this process successfully. Let's take a moment to review the questions, and we'll start with the first one. Kelly?
Good morning, everyone. We don't actually have any audience questions. However, I do have two clarifications that I need to make. Our presentation refers to letters of commitment. We removed that from the application requirement this time around. And so that is inconsistent with the guidance document. Your guidance document reigns supreme, if you will. So your signature on the application document serves as your letter of commitment in this case. So you'll want to make sure that your signature on the application is made by a person authorized to make financial commitments on behalf of your organization, and no letter of commitment from your organization is also required. So that's a simplification for you that we made. And the other clarification I wanted to make is that the guidance document currently has a different date for question deadlines. We have extended the question deadline to make sure that everyone has time to consider the guidance documents and think about their program, and in the midst of the holiday, still have time to get their question out. So the actual question deadline is January 4th, as stated in this webinar. The guidance document is being updated to reflect that. And then as a reminder, please type your questions in the question box. Royce or Greg, let's move on to the next steps and we'll come back to questions if any pop up.
All right, team. So when you need help to apply, we have an incredible team member and his name is Drew Aarons. Please reach out to him personally at drew.arends@metroenergy.org. And then if you just have a general question about the RFA, please send it to, once again, rfa@metroenergy.org by January 4th, 2025. Please keep in mind, once you submit a question, we will update those questions on our Metro Energy RFA landing page, so that just in case an answer is already answered, a question is already answered, it will already be out there on our website. I believe that's all we have at this time. Greg, do you have anything?
Nope, that sums it up for me, Royce.
Okay, terrific. We don't have any questions in the question box. Let's go over a couple of additional reminders. We do have a recording of today's webinar. It will be posted along with the slides of this webinar to the website. It will be available on our project proposal page, rather, within the next 2 business days. So you'll be able to revisit any part of the presentation and share it with your team as needed. And as Royce mentioned, we are here for guidance along the way, and I will leave you with this slide showing you how to contact Drew if you need help with your application, and how to contact Greg through the RFA email address. And Royce, Greg, I'm not seeing any new questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance. As a quick reminder, there are also some questions that we had in previous rounds for this funding. And those questions are already answered on our website. Again, at metroenergy.org/procurement. You can find a link there to any of our current and future funding opportunities. Thank you so much.